Did you ever see something that made you say, how did they do that? Did you ever see something that made you say, how did they do that? A fun welcome to our podcast with Randy Chris, where we talk to those who did it. Tell us how you did it. Tell us how you did it. Tell us how you did it.
Welcome to How Did They Do That, where we get the answers to that question you've asked 1,000 times. I'm your host, Randy Chris. Today, our guest is Mike Stauffer. Who is Mike Stauffer? I'm glad you asked. Mike gets to do things like sit in the morning on the front porch with the likes of Luke Bryan and sip coffee. Wouldn't you like to have a job like that? He knows them all. Mike is known as the builder of the stars in up-and-coming Nashville, Tennessee. It's one of the number one economic development areas in the country, and Mike has the privilege of building some of the finest homes there. Mike, welcome.
Thank you, Randy. I'm pleased to be here. My apologies. I'm working from the truck today.
Well, listen, we love it when you're out there in the field. You up building a big old house today? Or you doing site work? Or what kind of stuff you doing today?
I'm sitting in front of a 12,000 square foot house, and we're doing a $3.5 million renovation to it.
Wow. So it was a fine home before you started, right?
It was the estate of Larry Gatlin. The property was sold and subdivided, and I've got the pleasure of reworking the main house that was the original homestead on the property.
Wow. So is just not to get off track, but is a $3.5 million renovation of a 12,000 square foot home, is that major or minor?
That's probably more on the major side. It's easy on these big homes, Randy, because of the multiplier. Yeah, it's kitchens, bathrooms, pretty much everything inside the house. So it's getting freshened up to 2022.
Wow. So how does a guy go from just being a kid like everybody else to having a job like this? What was your path to this kind of success, Mike?
Actually, Randy, I'm a third generation carpenter by trade, and I had the blessing and curse of growing up in the business. And there's actually photos of me physically working at 4 and 5 years old with my father and grandfather.
And that taught you kind of a trade, I guess. As long as you can learn a trade like that, you probably never go hungry, right?
Yeah, that was the biggest thing, that my father wanted to make sure that I had a trade. Just to your point, Randy, if you have a trade, you're always able to take care of yourself and provide for a family if you possess a skill set.
I guess your dad and your grandfather started this business and they had a multi-million-dollar business going to hand you. Isn't that how it happened?
Not quite that big, smaller scale. It was back in the day, Randy, when you were a general contractor and you did majority of the work on the house. And, that's where, you poured your own footings, you laid your own block, brick, framed, roofed, sided. You pretty much did everything except the mechanical piece and probably finished the drywall. So at a young age, as my career progressed, I learned every aspect of how the trades work and how things need to be installed and put together throughout the entire phase of residential construction.
So your dad left you this wonderful business and you just had to kind of work as a kid and then learn how to do it, and then they handed it to you. Is that how it happened?
No, not at all. I fired my dad probably 4 times. He fired me probably 2 or 3. But as I grew and matured and realized that there was a better opportunity and do more with the family business, at that point in time, I don't want to say I had controlling interest, but I had control a lot of the decisions. And I started expanding the brand into larger homes, But no, there was no $1 million business given to me by any means. An old pickup truck and an old hammer, maybe, but that's about it.
Well, you know what? They say you're better off if you do it yourself because you learn by your mistakes and you don't make them a second time when it costs you the money. You agree with something like that?
I do, and it's a costly lesson to learn. And in the residential business, when they look at us for experience and knowledge, it's exact that. It's making those mistakes, learning from them, and trying to prevent them from happening again. Because to your point, in the arena that I'm playing in, it is financially devastating to do things 2 and 3 times over.
So I guess I've been in fine homes. And I've got a nice house myself, but I'm certainly not in the $20 million category. So when you go to build a house like that, first off, it's not like building a tract home for first home, which I'm sure you built first homes. You built that house when you were first starting, 1,800 square feet, 1,500 square feet, produce them and get them gone. Sold.
Yep, and now I build homes where the master closets are that big.
But when you go to a house like that, you're building a tract home. You don't even know who buys it really. Probably until the very end. But when you're doing this custom stuff, 12,000, 20,000 square feet, it's a whole different ball game, isn't it?
It is, but here's the thing that I learned, Randy, early on is if I'm building a house for a couple and it's their first home, the financial and emotional attachment to that house is the same as somebody building a $20 million home, and their expectations are the same. Everything's supposed to work, not leak, no squeaks, no cracks. So what I tried to pride myself on is quality is the ability to assemble things in the right order and make sure that everything functions the way it should. So I try to keep the same emphasis on the small stuff as the big. It's just bigger scale, but the expectations are all the same.
And that's a great point, and I can see how that commitment to quality, no matter what you do, just hammering the nails got to be in there right. Just like finishing a $20 million house, everything has to be right. But my point being that tract home, sometimes you really have it finished and it's maybe you change a cabinet or something for the ultimate users, but you really are not knowing who you're building it for a lot of times.
That's when you're building in the spec market. When they start these big houses, Randy, when they start these big houses, some of these take a year to year and a half to put together. And there's a series of professional services involved, from landscape architects to structural engineers, mechanical engineers, interior design. There's a project that I'm currently working on that's going to be possibly in excess of $35 million. They've been working on it for a year and a half, and they've probably spent $2 million just with a team of professionals to get this house ready to come up out of the ground.
So when you build it, you have to work with these professionals, and I'm sure you appreciate them and recognize their value because it takes the whole team. But ultimately, if you're the builder, it falls on your shoulders, doesn't it really?
Yeah, ultimately, the end product is the GC's responsibility. The challenge you have, Randy, is all those professional services are working for the client. They don't work for you. So it's a fine line of constantly resetting expectations with the client's team, my team, and the homeowner, making sure everybody's parts respected, initiated, and completed to their satisfaction.
I want to do some other things, but I love this line right now. Do the other professionals like the engineer or the interior designer maybe might be a good one. They make promises that you're supposed to keep, and they don't know what they're talking about sometimes. Has that ever happened to you?
That's a tricky question in case any of them are ever watching. They've been given the task to try to create something that's one-off. And that's what's very unique about a lot of the clients I work for. Their budgets allow them to do some very cool stuff. So it's more so
Sure.
that I get presented with ideas on things they'd like to see done, and then I have to kind of put a way to put it together so it's going to last the test of time. The one thing that I learned early
Gotcha.
off, Randy, is a house will tattle on itself. If you do a good job, you have minimal service and warranty. If you don't do such a good job, floors start squeaking, windows start leaking, water starts leaking. A house will tell you how it was built. And like a lot of things, Randy, there's only one builder on the house, and it's the first guy that touched it.
Yes.
So, your
Yes.
name is on that house forever. And it's not just, to your point earlier, I think you were trying to make, just selling the house to a client and moving on. The one thing that never changes is who built your house. That name stays the same.
I think that's right. I was just hearkening back to my very first house I bought. First time I saw it, it was finished. There was no customization. It was 1978. I was 26. It was in a far out area of Georgia because the housing and the land was much cheaper. I had to drive like 15 miles to get to where I was normally living as a growing up, but it was affordable. And that house was $28,000, and I had no input whatsoever. And it really was, like you say, thrown together by somebody who did not care so much about the kind of quality that you obviously bring to it. And therefore, it started talking to me, just like you said. I didn't think of it that way, but now that you said it, this started happening, that started happening, loose gutters, just things that over the years you have to fix, even completely remodify. But your houses, you try to make sure that doesn't happen. Isn't that fair to say?
That's the difference too, Randy, because you're kind of describing a production environment or track home environment. And there's a big difference between that type of construction and a true custom home builder, because the experiences are different. And the custom experience, the expectations are different. It's no different buying a car. You walk on the lot, you buy what's on the lot, you drive off, or you go sit at a desk and you go through the experience of having a car built. A lot of different questions get asked, different features, but at the end of the day, the core exercise is the same. You've got to put it together right every time.
I had seen this magazine. I'm pretty sure you built it. You were in it, but it was something like a glass floor in a sound studio.
Sean Silva, Tackle Box Films, and Forward Production. He did a lot of music videos for pretty much everybody. Kenny Chesney, Luke Bryan, Luke Combs, who worked a lot in that industry, and he shot majority of their videos. And if you watch any of the video shows, you'll see his name, Sean Silva. Those people tend to be very creative, and he had this idea that he wanted a freight elevator to look like it was hung from the ceiling with glass walls for its conference room. So he created the vision, and then it was up to me to help create ideas and means and methods to create that look. So he literally has what appears to be a floating glass conference room in the middle of his facility. Very cool.
Wow, and you built that.
Yes,
built
sir.
that. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Mike. You got a family there in Nashville, and
I've been blessed. I have a lovely wife, Nikki, and two beautiful little girls. We've been married about 20 years, and I probably have to attribute a lot of my success to my wife. She makes a big difference to allow me to do what I like to do. It's kind of a running joke. I tell her she should have married a doctor, better pay and better hours, because you're always on call for these high-end clients. But she's made me very successful by being a phenomenal mother, raising my kids, and helping me do what I like to do. We've been in Nashville now about 12 years. I had sold my company in Illinois and moved down here. And prior to getting established here in this market, I met a guy, Sean Silva, and got an opportunity to do his studio. Well, what helped segue me into everybody else is when it was done and they were walking in, it's pretty impressive. And they're like, who did this? So that opened the door for a lot of introductions to a lot of people in the industry. And I was given an opportunity to bid some of their work. And then I started landing just little pieces, and the little pieces became big pieces.
Well, that sounds impressive. So I guess you have a pretty crazy schedule, because you, just like you said, you're pretty much on demand at these at your clients, because they are demanding people when they're spending the kind of money they spend. Some of them, I'm sure, are extremely respectful, and some of them maybe not as much. They expect you to drop whatever you're doing when they call. How does all that work with some of these really, really rich people? Let's put it that way. People that have the means to spend $35 million on a house.
What you have to consider, Randy, is who you want to be when the day's done. And those people are going to call you. And if you don't answer the phone, they're going to pick the phone up and call somebody else. So I had to make a decision. If I want to be that guy, you have to take the call. No different if somebody comes to town to buy a house and real estate agent B doesn't answer the phone, they're not going to wait much longer for a return phone call. They're going to keep calling a real estate agent till they get what they need addressed or fixed. But my day can start as early as 4:30 in the morning and run till 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night in some cases. But the trade-off for that has been, I've never missed a soccer game. I've never missed a dance recital. I'm able to be at my kids' functions and key parts of their life. So the trade-off to me is worth it. I've had opportunities to travel and do things and, leave Monday morning and come back, Friday night, build homes in the Bahamas. And it wasn't worth it to me.
Right.
I got pushed into doing it. And I did it for a short bend to help them get a couple things straightened out. But at the end of the day, life to me is a bunch of balance of trade-offs. And my wife allows me to have those hours. And, it's no secret, when you work in this arena, if you do the time, you can make an above average living. But it comes at a price. But I just love what I do.
Well, and that's what makes you good at it, I'm sure. So if you were going to give somebody some advice of how to be a big time, good earning builder, what would you tell a young man or woman who wanted to become a builder? I know there are women builders.
They are. And this is just my opinion, Randy. In this residential home building environment, you do have a lot of publicly traded home building companies, and they are outstanding at mass producing homes. But there's one component that if you're going to be in the custom market is you have to understand the parts and pieces, and you have to appreciate and respect human capital. We aren't putting together widgets here. We have men and women working together in an uncontrolled environment. So you need to understand and be able to work with people, be able to solve problems and enjoy solving problems. But I'm not telling you got to be the smartest person in the room, but you need to know a little bit about everything so you can help everybody do their job. So the best thing that I could offer somebody is knowledge is everything. is not only to read, watch videos, but there's no substitute for hands-on experience. So a big part of my success came from my hands-on, because I'm able to relate and understand the challenges at a job site. I can see things being built in my head three-dimensionally, and it makes it easy for me to articulate that to the people. And I've always, like my grandfather said, I try to be a leader, not a boss, because there's a big difference. To be successful in the high-end residential game, you've got to be a leader. You've got to be able to work with the client, their staff. I've been on projects where the homeowners, Brandy, have 20 people running herd on the project. Interior decorators, property managers, their business managers, everybody that I have to keep corralled, to try to work and get the projects done. But you have to understand what you're selling.
One thing I think that is probably important, seems to me, I know I heard Glenn Beck say today on his program that he spent the last 15 years, he spent $1 million a year on security, keeping his family safe. He just was talking about something, and he said that. You have to contend with that aspect of it too, don't you? The security of the people.
Yeah, the biggest thing's their privacy. We have policies in place, no cameras, no photos, nothing can be released to a publication. And the biggest thing you have to do is their people too. They have a private life. When they get off their tour bus or get off their airplane or out of their helicopter, they're walking in their door just like you and I. And a lot of times I'm there. So I have to be present, but unknown, and work within their schedules, their timelines. You become part of their life, because the things that I do take 2 to 3 years to build, and then you have to warranty them forever. It's not a 1-year builder warranty.
So you have to respect their privacy, but when you're taking 2 or 3 years to build somebody's home and doing multiple things on that property, you actually get FaceTime with these stars and you become friends, I would say. Does that happen, or is it all you're the servant and they're the master? How does all that enter into it with the people? Because I know that some of them are nice and some of them aren't nice.
That's people in general. I tell people it's like being a manager of a country club. When I do these big projects, everybody's your boss, and everybody's got an opinion on how things need to be done. I always respect their privacy, their property, and try to be a good steward with their resources. So, if I do all three of those things, in most cases, relationships become organic and they just naturally happen. I have all their phone numbers in my phone, but they're not saved under their names. So I got to remember, right, who I call so-and-so, when the phone rings. But I've had security issues. I've had hot air balloons land with 4 or 5 women, land, hit the ground, take off. I've had women climbing the fences. I've been at dinner meetings and, people intrude on our dinner meeting to get a picture, to get an autograph. And I have to say, for the most part, they've all been very generous and stopped what they're doing, except for the hot air balloons. That got to be a little much at one of my clients' properties.
That's a real intrusion, I would say. Something like that is like, hey, don't bring your balloon over here and get out on my property because, hey, I don't know who you are or what your intentions are, right? I mean, that's a security risk, wouldn't you say?
It is. And they're vetted. We put surveillance equipment up on all the properties. I've worked for clients that have armed security guards. We have to clear, check in and check out with certain restrictions for accessibility to property. In Tennessee, you can conceal and carry firearms. You're not allowed to have firearms on the property. So we have to adhere to a pretty stringent rules set by their security teams, their managers, But just really the biggest thing is just people being nosy and want to see what's going on.
Right.
Quick story.
Sure.
I had Luke Bryan in my truck, and we were touring the property, and we pulled up, and here are two girls climbing over the fence through a neighbor's yard up on a big landscaping berm to try to get pictures. So we just happened to roll up on them, and I stopped the truck and rolled my window down just enough so they could see my face. And I said, ladies, can I help you? And they're like, is this Luke Bryan's house? And I'm like, it is. Is he around? I said, before I could say anything, he gets out of the truck, walks over. They're screaming, they're yelling. And, he stops what he's doing. He's gracious. He takes a picture with them and then encourages them that they're trespassing. And, and they need to be, they need to get back off the property. But I've had a lot of stuff like that happen. Yes.
Well, I think in particular, Luke Bryan, I don't know him. I watch him on TV like everybody else, and he sings good, and he's got lots of talent, obviously, but he just seems like one of those genuinely nice people who loves people. And, of course, he could be pushed to a point, I'm sure, like anybody. But he just, to me, just his public persona to me, just seems like he's just a wonderful person in general. How do you find
him? You hit it right on the head with him, Randy. I've introduced him to subcontractors. He'll introduce himself. He's very respectful of the people that are working for him and with him. You would know he's Luke Bryan when you're with him, except for what he looks like and when he talks, because he's got a very distinct voice. But I've introduced him to vendors, and when he's on the property, he'll walk up, ask them how they're doing, how's the family. He's truly a gentleman. He's respectful of the people that work for him, and what you see on TV, that's Luke Bryan. He's a great guy, and he just appreciates people.
What you see is what you get with him, and that's one of the best things about anybody. If you can just be yourself and be nice, I don't think there's much more you need to do in life to even be success. So do you you had said if you were going to give a young person advice, you said watch videos and read books. What kind of stuff has been a good mentor in the building business for you as you've come up through the ranks?
Probably, mentor wise, I want to say myself in some cases, but working along other tradesmen. When I grew up, you had a lot of father and son, uncles, cousins, a lot of people working. So I was always a curious student, and kind of your podcast, how'd they do that? And then once I figured out how they do it, why do they do it? So it's also the how and the whys. Is I always wanted to understand how things worked. Because if I understood how things worked, then I could explain how they go together and what I could do to keep them working. I've been blessed to work with some great people. I did a house in Bloomington. Thomas Gordon Smith, the principal architect at the University of Notre Dame. Bobby McAlpin here in Nashville. Chad James here in Nashville, and several other people that I've been blessed to work with, outstanding people in the industry. And I just, I got in the mindset that there's always something you can learn from somebody. And I always try to do a good job of paying attention and make sure I understand and just be a good steward with my time and their time, because to be honest with you, I kind of want to do it better than everybody else.
Well, that's what makes you so good, I'm sure, because, nobody's perfect, but you can be pretty darn close, can't you?
You can, Randy, and you're right. There is no such thing as perfect, and everybody understands what happens, but it's what you do when it happens and how long it takes you to do it after it happens. We've had plumbing pipes break. I've had basements flood. Those things happen. but it's how you mobilize, get back in, determine why it happened, who's going to pay for it when I go to put it back together. But you got to service what you sell.
So I had a nice house up in Georgia, and I wanted to change the front doors, and this is 25 years ago, and I went and bought this really nice stained glass double doors with the eyelets and the thing across the top. It's a beautiful home. And at the time, those doors cost like $12,000 to buy. If you were putting those in and somebody messed it up that you had to go get new ones, what happens when something like that happens? And you can't use the ones you've already bought.
That's correct. Obviously, if somebody breaks it, that's why they have insurance. But what I try to do with those high-end products, Randy, is once the door's set, I barricade that door opening so it can't be used. Mm-hmm. Nowadays, my window and door packages could be anywhere from $750,000 to $1.5 million just on windows and doors. I've put in front doors,
windows and doors in a house.
Yes. I've had island countertops that are $30,000 just for an island countertop. So when you get these high-end products, I have to protect those and try to minimize any damage to them. And I go to great lengths to do it. But if I can't determine how it got damaged or done, it's going to fall on the general contractor.
So you've eaten other people's mistakes more than once, I guess I'd have to assume.
That is correct. But unfortunately, that's what's the saying, that's the cost of doing business.
There you go. What does it feel like when you spent 3 years of your life building this magnificent palace, and the day comes and you've got your certificate of occupancy and it is done? There is not one more thing to be done. Punch list is done. Everything's working. The electric's on. Water's flowing. Everybody, you say, here is the key to your house. It is finished. What's that feel like when you do something like that kind of an accomplishment?
It's big. There's so much that goes into getting to that point, Randy, and managing expectations, being able to complete a house 100%, then being able to take into it and be done, and then to be able to enjoy it. To me, the real gratification comes a year later when they still love their house. Because, it's kind of like a new car, and something you're excited day one, but as they start using the house and living in it, that aha moment goes away. So my true gratification is I make it through the warranty period. I've had minimal issues with the house, and they're talking about the quality of the product. That's the win for me.
And telling their friends.
Yep. Or not telling their friends. Because, we've all learned in business, everybody loves to tell you when something's not good or whatever. And sometimes they're not so quick to tell you they're outstanding. But I try hard that when my clients are given an opportunity, I'm doing this or I'm doing that. Well, before you do that, you ought to at least give this guy a call. That's what I try to get out of my clients, is to be that guy that say at least to give him a call versus I wouldn't use him. And that comes from how your product wears. And as they're using it, living in it, do they have minimal disruptions to their family?
You know what I'm learning talking to you today, Mike? You look at everything. You've done it to me like 3 or 4 times here. You look at everything from every side you can look at it, don't you? And from the back side, the front side, the top side, the bottom side, how's this all going to fit together, even when you're talking marketing and future business and things like that? You really have a grasp on people and emotions and their expectations, and then the work product on top of it all. I'm amazed. I'm so glad you've come on the program and shared that with me. Do you feel like you do that?
It's like anything, it's managing expectations. and having to reset them. Our market that we work in, there are a lot of things that drive, with these crazy supply chain issues. I finished a house that was $3.5 million. I had to wait a year for the refrigerator. Just wasn't available. Some of the other appliance products take a year to 14 months to get. Windows and doors now take 6 to 8 months. A lot of the products are coming from overseas. So we're literally having to start projects. And before we break ground, I'm ordering things that I normally would order a year from now.
What happens when a crucial part is supposed to be here? You can't keep building the house without it, and it's not here. And you're building a $30 million house, and you've already got $15 million in it, and you got to stop for 4 months waiting on something. Does things like that happen?
They do, but I sure go a long way out of my way, Randy, to keep that from happening, because that's devastating to a project, the budget. I haven't had anything quite like that happen, but I have been short product, and we put a substitution in. We went and bought a $1,000 refrigerator to put in a, $5 million home while they waited for theirs to come in, and then it became the garage refrigerator. So I'm constantly solving problems every day related to my business and everybody else's business. So when any business has a shortcoming, I have to figure out how to maintain and keep my project rolling, because my client hears it, watches it on TV. But when it's their house, it's a little different. When it truly impacts them, it's easy to talk about, oh my gosh, they waited for a refrigerator for a year, but wait till it's their house, waiting for a refrigerator for a year. So it's all about expectations, Randy, and resetting them.
Well, they're many times they're the ones that want this $15,000 zero, what do they call it? What are those really expensive refrigerators called?
Sub-zero.
Zero something? What do they call them?
Sub-zero.
And they're the ones that it has to fit. You've designed the house to have those in there, and however they cover them up and make them real nice. So if it didn't come, and it didn't come until they make it. So I guess there's nothing you can do about that except substitute it and wait, right? That's the program at that point, isn't it?
Yeah, what we've done before, Randy, is we'll have all the specs for the appliances. So all the cabinets and casework is built to accommodate their selection. But when I put a smaller refrigerator in the opening, I reached out to my cabinet company, and we made a smaller decorative panel, so they didn't see a 6-inch gap all the way around the refrigerator. But what I did with the clients is I made it very clear at the beginning that this would be an issue, and here's how I deal with it. So when I did install that refrigerator and I put the decorative panel, there weren't any surprises. They knew exactly.
But then when you got the real one, when you got the permanent one, they really liked it then, didn't they?
Yeah, I mean, they were happy it was here, but it fit, and it went in just like it would have a year ago.
So I've heard you're a pretty generous guy. I read your bio. You've done some charity work. I guess you believe, as many do, I do, to whom much is given, much is expected. Tell me about some of your work on St. Jude House and that kind of stuff you do there.
Well, I'm actually from Illinois and was building in Peoria, and I had the opportunity to build 2 of the homes for the Rashids. Wonderful family. One's a urologist and the other's a cardiologist. And their uncle, Rich Eunice, I built homes for all 3 of them. Well, Rich sits on the board at St. Jude on the construction board, and I believe there's a building down there that's got Rashid's name on it. So as I was building for them, they introduced me to St. Jude. I'd see it on TV. I knew what it was, Randy, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't know what it was until I toured the facility. Once I toured the facility and saw what Danny Thomas's vision was, Phenomenal organization. I was presented with the opportunity if I'd be interested in building and donating a home for St. Jude. Well, obviously, it's not just me donating, it's vendors, subcontractors. So we did donate our first house. At the time, it was one of the largest amount of money raised in our market. I'm sure there's houses that have been built for St. Jude in California and other places that probably donate a little bit bigger, but we did 3 homes. Probably the most rewarding thing that we've been able to do. Just knowing that you make a difference in somebody else's life, small or big, it's just the fact that you made a difference or you're trying to make a difference. I got involved with an organization where kids were diagnosed and they're at home at this point in time, but still mobile. So we would do Flip My Backyard. We'd build swing sets. Limousines would pull up and grab the kids, take them away. They'd come back 5 hours later and I'd have 35 people there and we'd completely set a big play set up, trampoline, swing sets, things to try to give these kids something to smile about while they were able to still get out and about. And that was very rewarding because you could see that in real time. We were there when the limousine pulled up and when it pulled back in and the kids got out. Had great donators. Chick-fil-A would, they'd bring food out. So you get to see the kids use it. A little different at St. Jude, but the feeling's the same.
Do you read books on construction or management or leadership, or is there anything you would impart to somebody who might glean something that would push them along the way that you can think of?
Randy, I don't know that if I have a book, it's the same book that came from the College of Hard Knocks. As I've grown and matured throughout my career, a lot of those self-help books weren't available like they are now.
Sure.
So I can't honestly say that there's a book I read. I do look at other publications for inspiration and see what other people are doing, what other builders are doing. I like to try to stay current with the designer trends that tend to start California and work their way east. So any publication that I can see, any real estate magazine, I get my hands on walking out the grocery store, some of the better coffee table books from the big designers and architects. I always grab just some thumb through. But to me, there's no substitute, Randy, for the hands-on on where I got. I'm not going to say people can't build houses from a computer, but they're not built from a computer. They're built in the field with men and women. So being able to work alongside them, understand how they think, how they work, how to lead them. A lot of it, Randy's just been through some successes and failures, and I believe I've had more wins than losses.
Well, I believe you have, and you're a wonderful man, and I can tell why people like you and want to use you. Quality cannot be, it has to be there.
There's no substitute, Randy. There's no substitute for quality.
What's the name of your company out there, Mike, in Nashville?
The current one is Stauffer Construction.
I want to thank Michael Stauffer for coming on the podcast today. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. He's obviously a wonderful builder and just a quality guy. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our Apple podcast. And thanks for joining us today. Next week, let's learn, how did they do that?
Tell us how you did it. Tell us how you did it.